Welcome to the Death by Disney podcast. I'm your host, Adam, and today, who am I? I'm on one man versus... No, this is my mission. My mission is to be one man versus the most powerful entertainment corporation of all time. And I am going to watch all of their movies that they have ever released under the Walt Disney branding. And eventually, when I get to the Marvel movies and stuff, touchstone pictures and stuff, I might, I might do those things too, because those are Disney movies as well. We'll see. But the question is, who will win? Will it be me or the corporation? And by win, I mean, who will give up first? Will I physically leave my body and depart this world, or will Disney go bankrupt first and stop producing movies? I think we know who's going to win in this one, but hopefully it will be a fun adventure. And maybe someday I can find like a person to, when you get like a parrot and you have to think, because parrots live a long time, especially the big ones, and you have to think, who am I going to give this parrot to when I die? That's what I have to think about with this podcast. Who am I going to give it to when I die? Because there's still going to be more movies going on from Disney. Yeah, okay. So that was a bit of a ramble, but today I'm going to be talking about The Littlest Outlaw from 1955. Starring Pedro Armendariz, Joseph Kalia, or Kai, I can't even try to pronounce that in Spanish, and Rodolfo Acosta. Here is the synopsis. Synopsis. That that's a weird pair of words that go together. I'm not drunk, I promise. That's a weird pair of words that go together, synapsis and synopsis. But synopsis is the word I was looking for. Little Pablito is the 10-year-old son of a cruel horse trainer who's responsible for training a Mexican general's horse to jump for the grand race. The trainer's methods cause the horse to become afraid of jumping, and the general orders the animal's death. Pablito runs away with the horse, becoming a fugitive. He travels throughout Mexico, encountering several fugitives and a priest who tries to help. So here's my review of the film. I gave it 6 out of 10 stars. This movie is full of great shots of horses and stunts with horses. I also thought when I started to watch it that it might have been full of Mexican stereotypes, but the truth is that all of the actors were bilingual, and this film was shot in both English and Spanish. It was filmed in Mexico and gives us a glimpse of what that country was like nearly 70 years ago. The story itself is quite simple. A boy bravely and somewhat misguidedly tries to rescue a horse destined to be killed. There are parts in it which are going to be uncomfortable for animal lovers, as bullfighting is a prominent part of this story. Also, I would say it's highly probable that animals were hurt in the filming of this movie, as there were a lot of extreme stunts. The film also has a richness, and by that I mean the literal film that it was shot on. I don't think that they can make movies look that way nowadays, sadly. But despite the film looking great, I did find it a bit boring, and while it is admirable that they used actual Mexican actors speaking English, I think it would have been easier to follow in Spanish with subtitles. Yeah, so I didn't like the movie, but I think this is the time in Disney's history where they're really doing experimental things. Not like maybe like really cutting edge experimental films, but for a major motion picture studio to shoot a movie entirely in Mexico and then shoot it again in another language. Pretty big risk there. And I would say the story is also like Mexicans are never looked down on as a people in this story. It's even though I think it was created by an American, the whole thing, like you can tell that Mexican actors and the production had a lot to say and how scenes were shot and what to show. And even though it's clear that Mexico at that time was a very poor country, and also at the time it was ruled by this what was that called? PRI, I guess. So the Progressive Revolutionary, something like that. So they had a revolution in the around the same time as the First World War was ending, and so they had after that they had like a one party dictatorship, and it was like quasi socialist, but more not really. It's kind of weird to understand because I don't really understand what happened. But anyway, so they had this like really dictatorship, and the part of the fact that it's a general's horse that goes missing, it's really like an important part of the story. And there's this one part where the guy, and that's why I say the revolution was kind of socialist, because one guy, he works for the train company, and his wife is like, you better not do that, and you're gonna get in trouble. And he's like, well, I work for the train company. The train company is owned by the government, and I, as a member, I'm part of the people, so the people own the government, so the train company works for me. So it's kind of clear that they probably wanted to avoid offending the government, but in a way it makes it a very interesting. Obviously, it's not a documentary, but a document of that time in Mexican history. And yeah, as I said, the poverty, it's not shown that people are like, you know, dying of starvation or something, although probably in parts of Mexico there were people dying of starvation, but it's showing it like a real poor country, if you know what I mean, not like a stereotypical poor country. And of course there's rich people in this country. But I digress a little bit there. I just thought that it was a pretty unique thing. I think the movie as a story doesn't work, but I think Disney deserves kudos for actually trying at that time to make something which was different than what they normally put out in terms of, well, let's put it bluntly, racism. Because I think Peter Pan came out around this time. Or maybe not. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if I've done Peter Pan yet or not. I don't remember, but yeah, that was pretty racist. Song of the South. Yeah, but more on that right now, because usually I give some trivia, and there's not a lot of trivia about this movie other than to say that it was shot bilingually, which I think also people, maybe they do this in Bollywood more than other places. Yeah, definitely. They do it in Bollywood, but for Hollywood films, it's not very common. So that's the trivia for the movie. And usually I give you what I call the voice of the masses. And I give you like the least rated opinion on IMDb and the most. But in this case, there are literally 6 reviews. So you can tell that this movie is not very popular. My review was 6 out of 10 stars, and this one is 5 out of 10. So I'm not going to read the lowest because it's not much different than this one in terms of content, although there are a few interesting things that I want to talk about. And I'm not going to read the highest because it's basically like a few sentences like, yeah, this film is great, yay. So, as I said, 5 out of 10, Boy and Horse, again. It came as a surprise to me that The Littlest Outlaw is still circulating in home video, while Song of the South has been denied a proper home video release in the United States for matters related to, quote, political correctness. For while one is accused of racism and left in the vaults, the other is free of critique in spite of its scenes showing cruelty to animals. Not that I am for the banning of these films, Nazi movies, or comedies with white actors playing African Americans with black pancake. I just gotta insert some editorial comment. That's called blackface. That's not black pancake. because I understand that all these products have to be seen as signs of different times or modes of thought in mankind's existence on Earth, but this Disney double standard seemed to me a good example of entrepreneurial false morality. In these times when bullfighting is almost universally condemned, the last act of The Littlest Outlaw is built around one such scene in which animals and humans, including a toreador who seems to be actually gored by a bull, are hurt for the pleasure of the masses. Unfortunately, this sequence is perhaps the only segment in which The Littlest Outlaw is less insipid and becomes vivid, because otherwise it is a routine melodrama with equestrian choreography and a little comedy here and there. The Mexican locale is merely an excuse, for the story can happen anywhere, but in the end, that intent for narrating something Latino proved to be the worst part of the movie. By 1955, Mexican director Roberto Galvadon had made fine melodramas, including The Kneeling Goddess, In the Palm of Your Hand, Night Falls, Three Perfect Women, and powerful rural tales as Rosario Castro, The Shawl of Soledad, and Green Shadow. While there were more appreciable works to come after this Disney production, Ash Wednesday, Macario, Rosa Blanca, and The Golden Cockerel. But in this tale of boy and horse wandering through the countryside, conceived by producer Larry Landsberg, whose filmography shows a strong liking for animal movies, Galavadon could not avoid the Disney formula, with a saccharine relationship between boy and horse, odd and funny secondary characters, a silly song called Doroteo, and a kid that hardly looks like a rural Mexican boy of indigenous ancestry who would look more comfortable in a suburb of Mexico City. Pedro Armendáriz and Rodolfo Castro play the rude men they used to portray in their sleep. The rest of the Mexican actors are efficient and likable, and everybody seems to enjoy what they're doing. I am sorry that I could not share their enthusiasm, and that's from Edgar St. From 2017. That was a long review, and usually I don't bother reading reviews that long, but I think that there are a lot of interesting points, and most of the review is really well argued, especially the part where he's talking about the Mexican productionness, and it's clear that this person does know a lot about Mexican cinema, and he's seeing this as kind of Disney's attempt to cash in on Latin Mexican, give their movies like a Latino flavor, as he said. And I said from Disney's, as I said earlier, from Disney's perspective, it was a pretty remarkable thing to try and achieve, this sort of bilingual movie. But by Mexican standards, of course, it's not a great film. It's not a great film by English standards as well. So I do agree with that part. However, I don't think that. So I also think that this person is probably a bit older, because in 2017, I don't think that they were still releasing VHSs or DVDs even. Like, I don't think that you can buy DVDs or Blu-rays now. Maybe you can, but they're like used. So the fact that this movie was not released or was released earlier is a testament to the fact that views on bullfighting changed over the years, and views on animal abuse changed over the years. And the same thing that happened with that happened with, civil rights earlier. So to make the argument that Disney is somehow being like weird because they wouldn't release Song of the South and they would release this is kind of proving your own argument wrong, by which I mean that Disney is a company, and it's a capitalist enterprise, And we can argue about the merits of capitalism till the cows come home. But the fact is, Disney will release things that they think or that they hope will make money for them and not cause a significant backlash. So, if at the time they thought that it was commercially reasonable to release this film, I don't know why they would, because there's only 6 reviews on IMDb and it's nothing to do with the animal abuse. It's just not a popular film. But if they thought that it was going to be make them money, they would release it, right? The thing about Song of the South is, yeah, maybe they would make a lot of money if they released it on VHS back in the 80s or back in the 90s, but the society had moved on from that way of thinking. And I can kind of understand why people might want to defend Song of the South specifically, because it is actually a good movie. That's the horrible thing about Song of the South. I think I have released that episode already, so go back and listen to that if you're curious what my thoughts were about Song of the South. But basically, it is a good movie, but to deny the fact that it's horribly racist would be absurd. And the other point that I want to pick up upon is Disney, as I said before, is a commercial company. They have released a lot of, content, let's say, over the years, and some of it has been quite racist. If they're not a library, right? They don't have any obligation to release all of their product all of the time to you. And if they don't release, for example, Song of the South, or they don't put it on Disney Plus, that's not banning it, right? You're not going to go to prison if you watch Song of the South. I think that we get I think in the United States, especially in the West, they don't understand what banning books means or banning movies. If you really ban something and you make it illegal, then when you watch that thing, that is a crime. So you can make the argument, very complicated, I admit, but you can make the argument that, well, the library should have access to this content and this content, and people should be able to judge, but that's a library. That's not a commercial company, right? And you can still find Song of the South if you're internet savvy, right? You can find most movies that Disney has produced if you're internet savvy. And so that's the one argument. They're not actually banning anything. They're just not trying to make a profit out of it, which is admirable, I would say. The other argument, and okay, I'm going to talk a lot about this because it just makes me angry a little bit. Not angry, but I think that people, especially with this review, because you can tell that the person really has a deep respect and admiration for Mexican cinema. And the first part of his argument is at a 2 grade, to a 2nd grade level. To be honest, it's very shallow. So we do not, as a society, have any obligation to the cultural productions of the past. What do I mean by that? When Shakespeare was around and when his plays were being performed, women could not be actresses because being an actress was considered like being a prostitute. So you couldn't have women actresses. So all of those female parts were performed by boys in drag, right? Romantic scenes, whatever. Now, when people put on Shakespeare now, when these theater companies put on Shakespeare, they don't use boys in drag. Why? Because society has moved on and it's okay that there are female actresses now. So I think the part where film gets confusing is that film is supposedly this static, unchanging medium, kind of like a painting. But paintings, it's interesting because paintings don't really have a lot of subtext connected to them. You can have so you can clearly see the image and you like it, you don't like it, you appreciate it, whatever. But with film, they have all of this baggage. So Disney decides not to release Song of the South, and then people are like, oh, why not? I watched it, it's okay. And they don't realize, like, okay, well, maybe you watched it as a Mexican or a white guy. You watched it, you didn't see any problem with it, but maybe somebody else would see some problems with it. And maybe the image of the South that it's showing you is not actually what happened. So, yeah. So they put a lot of this subtext on Song of the South that it doesn't really deserve. Because at the heart of it, with that particular movie, it is a good movie, but it is horribly racist. And people don't really rush to defend, for example, Peter Pan, when Peter Pan, I think, is far more racist than Song of the South is. And you know why people don't defend it? Because it's available. Why is it available? Because Peter Pan, the actual book and all of that, is still like a respected cultural institution. Maybe in like 20 years or whatever, we would be able to um, maybe Peter Pan also would go that way. But I think when they reboot Peter Pan, they don't do it the way that Disney did in the animated version. So I think that's why maybe Peter Pan is safe. But yeah, so people are not fighting to save Peter Pan or saying that this is a sign of political correctness. It's like this woke and DEI stuff. People tend to think that it's gone too far one way. People on the right, usually in America, say, well, the culture war is horrible and we can't even watch Song of the South. How many of them have actually watched Song of the South? Like, I don't think so many people would be rushing to defend it if they had actually seen the movie, because unless you have the mentality of a doorknob, you're gonna see that it's very problematic, right? And there's so many I'm sorry that I didn't organize my thoughts before starting to talk about this, but there's so many other aspects to it, which is like what people are expecting is that a there would be adults who are consuming this, and this is not like a protect the children argument, but it kind of is. Like, adults would be watching Song of the South and judging it on its own merits, right? So that's what I did. And the person in their review mentioned blackface, but imagine a child watching that stuff, or a child watching Nazi propaganda. Like, no one in their right mind would say, yeah, maybe it's okay if we show this Nazi propaganda film in class to 7-year-olds. That's not going to have any effect on how they think about the world. I mean, probably it wouldn't. Like, but imagine that they remastered it and they made it in color in English and it was exactly the same movie, right? Nobody would think that that would be a good idea. And that's what people are, these so-called like cultural anti-woke people, anti-DEI people, political correctness that used to be people. That's what they're fighting for, right? They're fighting for a world in which your 5-year-old can see blackface. But you can see blackface as an adult if you want to see what it looks like, right? There's footage you can find on the internet. You can find it. You can watch the jazz singer all you want. But should you show that to a child? No, because that's going to help influence how they view the world, how they interact with the world. Um, yeah. So I kind of started this argument, but I didn't really make it to the conclusion earlier. I also think that you can have a movie that is problematic and you can just edit it so it's not problematic anymore. I did a review. You'll probably listen to this far, far in the future, but I did a review of The Ugly Dachshund, and it's this kind of stupid movie, stupid but fun movie about this couple, and the lady likes dachshunds, and the other one wants I forget what breed of dog it is, but it's a bigger, much bigger dog. Oh, Great Dane. It's a Great Dane. He wants a Great Dane, so he tricks her that it's a Dachshund puppy, but it's actually a Great Dane. I don't know how that worked, but anyway, so it's a movie like that, and the the dog, like there's wild and wacky antics abound in that movie. And so you're thinking to yourself, yeah, this is kind of an enjoyable movie. This is fun. And then randomly in the middle of this movie from 1976, I think, or something, in the middle of this movie, there are these Japanese people who see a dog and then, oh, it's a lion in a Japanese stereotypical accent, which, oh, to be fair, a lot of Japanese people do have that accent, but that's for reasons I'm not going to go into here. But are you telling me that a Japanese person has never seen a dog before? Has never seen a large dog before? Living in North America in the 1970s? Like, so that part is ridiculously and stupidly racist. So you could just remove that part from the movie and people would not have any problem. Like, for example, they mentioned this song, Dorito, or whatever it's called. That was removed in the movie that I watched for whatever reason. I don't know why, but it was removed. So movies are edited all the time, right? And it's only when they're edited for this reason or they're removed from distribution that people are like up in arms. Like, for me, it's much more egregious where you have George Lucas and he's making prequels to Star Wars and he changes the scene where Anakin as Darth Vader, not Darth Vader anymore, but Anakin as an adult is shown at the end. And so I think that's Empire Strikes Back. I forgot the title, which of the original trilogy it is, but at the end of you see him, right, with Yoda, with Obi-Wan Kenobi, and they're the actors. So what George Lucas did is that he replaced the actor playing Anakin as a Force ghost with the actor who played Anakin in the prequels. And it kind of makes sense, right? But you did not have to do that at all. For me, really egregious example of editing a movie. And, and then there's like all of the weird CGI things that they added to the original series. But that's a perfect example. So we might not like it as fans, but there's actually nothing morally or ethically wrong with anyone doing that to a movie because it's their movie, it's their intellectual content. They can change it to suit the whatever they want to do. Yeah, so to conclude, should you watch The Littlest Outlaw? No, it is still problematic. I think the point about animal abuse is important, and I think the criticism that this movie wasn't banned because of animal abuse, whereas Song of the South was banned, is a bit flat for me. But yeah, if you like horses, I think this would be an interesting movie, but also an uncomfortable movie as well, because you would know, like, I don't know much about horses, so I don't know when a horse is actually suffering or not. But for me, it did look like they could have moments where it was a bit strange. So, yeah, actually, I'll change my mind. I'm not recommending this movie. All right, bye.